In chemistry, there is a thing we call the rate-limiting step. In any reaction, no matter how many things are happening at once, there is one step that decides how fast the whole thing can go. You can pour all the heat and all the pressure and all the money you want into the other steps, and nothing moves any faster because the slow step does not care about your hurry. It keeps its own time. I have spent 30 years of my life being the slow step that nobody wanted to pay for. And on the day a brilliant young woman with a beautiful title decided to cut me out of the reaction so the company could move faster, I want to tell you what happened to the whole thing. It stopped. Not because I made it stop, because that is what reactions do when you remove the step that was holding them together. And a polymer does not care how confident you are. It does what the molecules do. Let me tell you the rest. My name is Dr. Lorraine Boykin. I am 53 years old, and I am the principal research scientist for a materials company called Vantage Polymers, just outside Wilmington, Delaware. I run the lab that makes the adhesive that holds together things you would very much prefer stayed together. If you have ever done the careful, unglamorous, invisible work that everyone depends on and no one wants to fund, the work that only gets noticed the day it is missing, sit down with me a minute. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight, and tell me about the slow, careful thing you do that the world treats like it is free until the day it breaks. I have a feeling a lot of you know exactly the kind of work I mean. Let me tell you how good I am at this, because the disrespect does not mean anything until you understand what they were disrespecting. I did not grow up around science. I grew up in a row house outside Wilmington, where my father worked 31 years at a bottling plant, on the line, on his feet, and came home smelling like syrup and machine oil. My father could not have told you the difference between an atom and an apple, but he taught me the only thing that has ever really mattered in my field. He used to say, "Baby, when you make something that goes in somebody's hand or under somebody's feet, you do not cut the corner you cannot see, because that is the exact corner that comes back for you." He said it about bottle caps. I have spent my whole career saying it about molecules. There was a chemistry teacher at my high school, Mrs. Okafor, who caught me staring too long at a reaction in a beaker and decided I was worth the trouble. And she stayed after school with me for 2 years, and because of her, I got to a university, where I was usually the only black woman in the lecture hall, and frequently the only one anybody assumed had earned the seat. I want you to understand what that costs. Being the only one, it means you do not get to have a bad day, because your bad day becomes evidence about everybody who looks like you. It means you learn to be twice as prepared to check your work 3 times when the man next to you checks his once, because you already know that his mistake will be called a mistake, and yours will be called a pattern. I earned my doctorate that way. I built my early career that way, in industrial labs where I was handed the problems nobody else could crack and given half the credit when I cracked them. I learned to let the work speak, because the work was the only thing in the room that could not be talked over, ignored, or explained away. A man can interrupt me, a board can overrule me, but a result that reproduces, a number that comes back the same every single time you run it, is a kind of truth that does not need anyone's permission to exist. So I learned to live there, in the place where the data is, because it was the one place in the world they could not move me out of. I have a small glass vial on my desk that I have kept for 31 years. Inside it is a pinch of white crystalline powder, the first compound I ever synthesized that actually worked. The night I was 19 and stayed in the lab until 2 in the morning and watched a reaction do exactly what my own 2 hands had predicted it would do. I keep it because it reminds me of a thing the world is always trying to make me forget. The results do not care who I am. The molecule did not know I was a poor black girl whose daddy worked a bottling line. It only knew the chemistry. and the chemistry was true. And it has been true every single time since, no matter who was standing in the room doubting me. Let me give you one example, so you know this is not just an old woman bragging on her memory. About 8 years ago, before any of this, we had a batch of adhesive headed out the door for a run of medical infusion pumps, the kind that sit beside a hospital bed and push medicine into a person's arm, drop by drop, all night long. Everything had passed. Every test was green, and I could not sleep because something in the viscosity readings from one lot was off by a hair, a tiny thing, the kind of difference most people would have rounded away without a second thought. I went back in on a Saturday, and I ran it again and again, and I traced that hair of a difference all the way back to a supplier who had quietly swapped one ingredient in a raw material without telling anybody. A change that would have let the adhesive soften at body temperature inside the pump months down the line in a way that no routine test on Earth would have caught. We held the batch. We never shipped it. Nobody outside that lab ever knew there had been a single thing to know, because the entire point of catching it is that nothing happens. There was no recall. There was no headline. There was no grieving family standing in front of a camera. There was just a Saturday I spent chasing a number that bothered me and a disaster that quietly never occurred because I refused to round the hair away. That is the work. It is invisible by design. The better you are at it, the less anybody can see that you did anything at all. And that, right there, is exactly why it is the first thing a person in a hurry decides she can live without. That is the thing about my discipline, and it is the thing the young woman with the title never understood. Chemistry is the most honest field there is. A reaction does not care what you believe, or what you hoped, or what quarter you need it to happen in. The data does not lie. The data also will not flatter you, which is the real reason people stop looking at it. I built my career on that honesty. Over 30 years, I developed the structural adhesive that is the flagship of my company, the one that bonds the components inside medical devices and aircraft panels, and the kind of equipment where the word failure means something a great deal worse than a refund. I hold the patents. I know that formula the way you know the sound of your own child crying in another room. And the heart of that formula, the thing that makes it work, is a slow step, a long, patient cure, and a stabilizer that has to be added at exactly the right moment and given time to do its quiet work, so that the bond does not just hold on the day you make it, but holds after 10 years of heat and cold and stress, holds when somebody's life is sitting on top of it. It takes time. It costs money, and it is the exact step they decided they could no longer afford. Her name was Sloane Devlin. She was 41, and she arrived at Vantage with a title that did not exist before they invented it for her: Vice President of Innovation. She had an MBA from a famous school and a background in management consulting and a way of speaking that made the older scientists feel like fax machines. She had been brought in by the board to, in her words, transform our research culture and accelerate our time to market, which is a long way of saying make it faster and make it cheaper. I want to be fair to her because she was not stupid and she was not a cartoon. She was genuinely smart, and she genuinely believed that speed was a virtue and that caution was a disease. And she had been rewarded her entire career for moving fast and breaking things in industries where the things that broke were apps, not aircraft panels. She had simply never worked anywhere that the breaking could kill somebody. And when she looked at me, a 53-year-old black woman who had been in the same lab for 2 decades, she did not see 30 years of irreplaceable knowledge. She saw a cost center. She saw the past. The first time she came through my lab, she walked right past me to the youngest man on my team, a junior chemist named Trevor. and she shook his hand and asked him to walk her through the flagship process. Trevor, bless him, kept pointing at me, and she kept not seeing it, the way some people cannot see a thing their mind has already filed under the wrong heading. When I introduced myself as the principal scientist, she gave me a bright, surprised, recalibrating little smile, the kind you give when the picture in your head and the person in front of you do not match. And she said, "Oh, wonderful," and turned right back to Trevor. After that, in every meeting, she called the younger men on the team by their titles and called me Lorraine. Not out of malice, out of 1,000 small assumptions she had never once examined, which is so much harder to fight than malice, because you cannot point at any single one of them without being told you are imagining things. Velocity was everywhere within a month. There were posters in the hallways with the countdown clock on them. There were all-hands meetings where Sloan talked about disruption and moving at the speed of the market and refusing to be held hostage by the way things had always been done. And a particular kind of fear settled over that building. The fear that anybody who raised a concern would be quietly labeled a person who did not get it, a relic, a blocker, a member of the old guard. I watched good scientists, careful people, start to keep their worries to themselves because the cost of speaking up had gone up overnight. I watched my young chemist, Kendra, learn in real time that the safe career move was to nod. And that was the part that got to me more than anything Sloan ever said to my face. It is one thing to make a fool of an old woman. It is another thing entirely to teach a brilliant young one that her caution is a liability and her silence is a skill. In meetings, Sloan would ask for my input and then, before I had finished the sentence, turn to Trevor and ask him to take the action item, as though I were the concern and he were the solution. She took to calling my decades in that lab institutional memory, which sounds like a compliment until you notice that memory is a thing you keep behind glass in a museum. She told me, warmly, in a one-on-one, how much she admired my dedication to the craft and how she wanted to free me from the day-to-day so I could focus on mentorship and legacy, which is the corporate way of walking a person to the door while holding it open and smiling the whole time. Every word of it was deniable. Not one piece of it could have been written down and shown to anybody as proof of anything at all. That is how it always works at that altitude. It is never a slammed door. It is 1,000 small redirections, 1,000 little turns toward the younger man, until one morning you look up and realize they have quietly rerouted the entire reaction around you. It got worse still, the way it does, each step deniable. Sloan Devlin launched an initiative she named Velocity, with a logo and a launch event and a countdown clock. And the entire point of Velocity was to get our products out faster and cheaper. And she came for my adhesive first, because it was the most expensive thing we made. And the most expensive part of it was that slow step, the cure, the stabilizer, the patience. She put it up on a slide in front of leadership, my formula, and she circled the slow step in red, and she called it, and I am quoting her, legacy inefficiency. She proposed a reformulation that removed the slow stabilizing step and shortened the cure by 60%, which would cut the cost and triple the output, and which would also, I knew with total certainty, destroy the one quality that mattered. I told her, I want you to know that I told her, plainly, in the room, I said the stabilizer is not inefficiency. It is the entire reason the bond survives thermal cycling. I said if you cut that step, the adhesive will test beautifully on day one and start failing somewhere around the 18-month mark, after it has been heated and cooled a few thousand times in the real world. And by then, it will be in the field, inside the devices, under the panels, and we will not be talking about a cost savings. We will be talking about a recall, and maybe worse. I said all of it, calmly, with the data, and Sloan Devlin listened with her head tilted in that patient way, And then she turned to the room and said,
I appreciate Lorraine's deep institutional caution, and we are so lucky to have that perspective in the room. But we cannot let 30 years of how it has always been done hold this company back from where it needs to go.
And everyone nodded, because she had the title and the countdown clock and the energy. And I had a warning that would not pay off for 18 months. And in a room optimized for speed, a slow truth always loses to a fast lie. They greenlit the reformulation. They shelved my formula. They thanked me for my passion, the feeling and the fact. If your jaw is tight right now, if you have ever stood in a room and watched someone cut the exact corner you warned them about and call your warning an attitude problem, do me one small favor and type a single word in the comments, just so the next person scrolling by knows it was real and that the careful ones are not crazy. I went home that night to my house, where I live with a very patient husband named Marcus, who long ago stopped expecting me home before 8, and I sat at my kitchen table with my father's voice in my head, do not cut the corner you cannot see. And I made a decision that I knew might cost me my career. I was not going to fight her in the meeting. Because you cannot win a meeting against a person who has been given the room. But I was going to do the one thing a scientist can always do, the one thing that does not require anybody's permission. I was going to let the molecules testify. Here is the beautiful thing about my field, the thing that has kept me sane for 30 years in rooms that did not want to hear me. I never have to win the argument. I only have to design the experiment so well that the molecules win it for me. A person can dismiss my opinion. A person cannot dismiss a result they can run themselves and watch come out exactly the same. So I did not write a memo, and I did not send the kind of email that lands in a folder and dies of old age. I built a test that would speak in a language even a countdown clock could not argue with. So I did what I have done my whole life. I ran the experiment. Quietly, on my own time, on a corner of the bench that nobody was watching. I took Sloan Devlin's reformulation and I put it through accelerated aging, which is a way of compressing years of real-world stress into weeks, heating and cooling the bonded samples over and over to see how they hold. And I documented every step, with dates, with photographs, the way Mrs. Okafor taught me 35 years ago. Because a result you cannot reproduce and prove is just an opinion in a lab coat. I watched those samples through the cycles, and right on schedule, right where the chemistry said it would, the reformulated bond began to fail. Not dramatically, quietly, a little delamination at the edges, a little loss of strength. Exactly the slow betrayal I had promised them. I ran it 3 separate times on 3 separate batches, because 1 result is an anecdote and 3 is a finding. And I was not about to walk into a room full of people who already believed I was the past with anything less than the truth nailed to the floor. I photographed every sample at every stage. I logged every cycle, every temperature, every hour, by hand, in a bound notebook with the dates written in ink. The old way, the way you cannot fake and cannot quietly backdate later. By the end, I no longer had a worry, or an opinion, or 30 years of caution. I had a fact. The reformulation failed. It failed quietly, it failed predictably, and it failed right on the schedule I could have written down before I ever began. Because in fact, I had written it down before I began. I had it on film. I had it in numbers. And I had a date stamp on every page that said I had run all of it weeks before the product was scheduled to ship. And then I almost did nothing with it. I have to be honest with you about that, because the almost is the part that matters. I sat in my lab late one night with that little vial of my first compound in my hand, the proof from when I was 19. And I thought about how tired I was. I thought about the early retirement package Sloan had floated to me, warmly, as a way to honor my legacy, which is what they call it when they want you gone, but want you to thank them for it. I thought about Trevor, and about a young chemist on my team named Kendra, 28, brilliant, the only other black woman in the building, who looked at me the way I once looked at Mrs. Okafor. And I thought, if I make a war out of this, they will not just push me out, they will make sure the ones who stood with me never rise. I thought, take the package. Let it fail in 18 months. Let it be her name on the disaster, not yours. You will be retired by then, on a beach somewhere, vindicated in private. Nobody could blame you. You warned them. I sat with that for a long time, and I am not too proud to tell you it tempted me. Because it was the safe thing, and the safe thing is always tempting when you are tired down to the bone. I thought about the beach. I thought about Marcus, who has eaten a lot of cold dinners waiting on my experiments to finish, and who deserved a wife who came home at a decent hour. I thought about how good it would feel, in some small and honestly ugly corner of my heart, to see Sloan Devlin's name on the recall, to be proven right with my feet up and an umbrella in my drink. And then I thought about the pump, the medical pump, 8 years back, the one that quietly never failed because I chased a number on a Saturday. I thought about all those people who went home from the hospital and never knew that their lives had been sitting on top of my refusal to round a hair away. And I thought, if I take the package and let this ship, there is a version of that story where the pump does fail, where somebody's mother or somebody's son is on the wrong end of a corner I saw and decided not to mention because I was tired and they had hurt my feelings. And I knew I could not live in that version of myself. And I held that vial. And I thought about my father, coming home smelling like syrup, telling me about the corner you cannot see. And I understood that being right in private, after people had already been hurt, was not the same thing as being a scientist. The whole point of the work is that you say the true thing before the failure, not after. Anybody can be right at the funeral. The job is to be right in time to prevent one. Being right too late is just grief with a footnote that says, you knew. So I put the vial down. I picked up my data, and I went and registered myself for the design review. The reckoning came at the design review, which is the meeting where the reformulated adhesive was going to be formally approved to ship, with leadership in the room and the board's technology committee on a screen. And, as it happened, the chief engineer from our single biggest customer dialed in, because his company was about to put our new, faster, cheaper adhesive inside a product that human beings would trust with their safety. Sloan Devlin ran that meeting like a coronation. She had velocity on the screen. She walked them through the cost savings and the throughput, and she presented the reformulation as proof that the old way of doing things had been holding us back. And she was good. I will give her that. She was very good. And the room was nodding along to the future. And then she opened it up for questions, the way confident people do when they believe the answers are already settled. And I raised my hand. I did not raise my voice. I have never had to. I said, before we approve this to ship, I would like to share some accelerated aging data on the reformulation, because I ran it, and I think the committee should see it. Sloan's smile did not move, but something behind her eyes did. She said, of course, though I am not sure we need to relitigate the formulation at this stage. And I said, gently, I do not think we are relitigating anything. I think we are about to find out whether we send this to a customer or not. And I put my data up on the screen. I walked them through it the way Mrs. Okafor taught me, plainly, one slide at a time. Here is the bond strength on day 1, beautiful, exactly as Sloan promised. Here is the same bond after the equivalent of 18 months of thermal cycling. And I put up the photograph of the delaminated edge, the quiet failure, the corner that came back. The room went very still. I want you to picture that stillness, because a silence in a room like that has a texture, and I have spent my life learning to read it the way I read everything else. It was not the silence of people who did not understand. It was the silence of people who understood exactly, and who were rapidly recalculating how close they had come, and whose names were attached to what. I watched a vice president quietly close his laptop. I watched a member of the technology committee on the screen lean in toward his camera. And I watched Sloan Devlin's face do the thing a face does when its owner feels the ground move underneath it. The small, involuntary stillness, the recalculation, the very same expression she had given me on her first day in my lab, when the principal scientist turned out to be the woman she had just walked past. And the chief engineer from our biggest customer, a man named Walt Brenner, who has trusted my data for 15 years, said, over the speaker, in the flat voice of a man who builds things that cannot fail, "Lorraine, are you telling me this version delaminates after 18 months? And I said, "Walt, I am telling you the chemistry was always going to. I just put it on a calendar." Sloan Devlin tried. She said the accelerated aging protocol could be questioned, that the conditions were aggressive, that we should not let one data set derail months of progress. And I said, "You are welcome to run it yourself. It is fully documented. That is the whole point of doing it the slow way. And the thing about a polymer," I said, and I said it to the whole room and not just to her, "is that it does not care about your protocol or your title or your countdown clock. It does exactly what its chemistry tells it to do, every time, whether or not anybody in this room believes it. I am not asking you to trust me. I am asking you to trust the molecule. The molecule has no agenda." There was nothing she could say to that, because there is never anything anyone can say to a result they can reproduce. The committee did not approve the reformulation. They did not approve it because Walt Brenner said his company would not accept it. And Walt Brenner said that because the data was the data, and the data had a date on it that said I had been right weeks before anybody asked me to be. Sloan Devlin found me afterward, in the hallway outside the lab. She did not apologize, not in full, and I had long since stopped requiring that from anyone. She stood there, this brilliant, certain woman, whose certainty had just walked into the chemistry and lost. And she said, "I have spent my whole career being told that the people who say slow down are the people getting left behind." She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "It did not occur to me that sometimes they are the only thing standing between us and a recall." That was as close as she was going to come. And it was honest, and I took it, because my father did not raise me to be small even to the people who had been small to me. I did not get her job. I did not want her job. What I got? When leadership finally understood how close they had come to shipping a failure with their name on it, was the one thing I had actually been fighting for the whole time. They reinstated the slow step. They put my formula back. And when they asked me what else I needed, I did not ask for a title or an office. I asked them to stop treating the careful work like it was free. And I asked them to protect the people on my team who do it. And I told them that the next time somebody with a countdown clock wanted to cut a step they could not see, there had better be a scientist in the room with the standing to say no and be heard. They wrote it into the process. They call it a technical veto now. I call it letting the molecule have a seat at the table. It will not stop every bad decision a company in a hurry wants to make. But it means that the next time someone with a countdown clock circles a slow step in red and calls it inefficiency, There will be a scientist standing there with the authority to say, "Not until I have run it," and watch it come back. That is not much in the scheme of things, but it is the difference between a company that learns from a near miss and a company that waits for the real one. I have spent 30 years trying to be the reason the real one never comes. I am still Advantage Polymers. Sloan Devlin is still the Vice President of Innovation. And these days, to her credit, when she wants to move fast, she comes and asks me which steps are safe to speed up and which ones will come back for us. And she listens to the answer, which is more than most people ever learn to do. Velocity is still a program, but it is a wiser one now, and it has a slow step built into it on purpose. And Kendra, the young chemist who watched the whole thing, the only other woman in that building who looks like me, sat with me a few weeks later while I showed her how I had run the aging study, every careful step of it. And at the end, I took the little glass vial off my desk, the one with the powder I made when I was 19, and I told her what it was, and I let her hold it. I did not give it to her, because that proof is mine until I am gone. But I told her to go make her own. I told her there is no shortcut to the vial. You earn it one true result at a time, in a quiet lab, when nobody is watching and nobody believes you yet. And you keep it for the rest of your life, to remind you that the molecule was always on your side, even when the room was not. A few days after that, I came around a corner of the lab and caught Kendra running an accelerated aging study of her own, on a project nobody had asked her to question, on her own time, on the quiet end of the bench where no one was watching. She did not tell me she was doing it. I just saw the samples cycling, and I saw a bound notebook open beside them with the dates logged in her own careful hand. And I did not say a single word. I just smiled, and I went back to my own bench, because that, right there, is the only thing I have ever actually been trying to build. Not a formula, not a patent. A young woman who knows in her bones that the molecule is on her side, and who is not afraid to make it say so out loud in a room full of people who would rather she stayed quiet. So let me ask you something before I let you go, and take your time. Where in your life are you the slow step that everybody wants to cut? The careful corner that the people in a hurry treat like it is free? What is the thing you know to be true that the confident people in the room keep talking over because the truth of it will not show up until later, after they have stopped listening? Tell me about it down below. Tell me about the warning you gave that they called an attitude, and what happened the day the chemistry came back to prove you right. Because here is what 30 years has taught me, and I will leave it with you. They can give a person a title that does not exist yet. They can give her a logo and a countdown clock and a room full of nodding heads. They can move fast and break things, right up until they try to break a thing that was holding something important together. And then the molecules do what the molecules always do. The data comes back with a date on it. And the slow, careful, unfundable woman they tried to cut out of the reaction turns out to be the only reason the whole thing did not come apart. You keep being the slow step, baby. The reaction needs you more than it knows. I am Dr. Lorraine Boykin. The data does not lie, and neither, it turns out, do I.